This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
The African Union tells the UK to withdraw from Chagos Islands after deadline passes. Ethiopia's ruling coalition forms a single party ahead of the 2020 polls. And South African Airways inks a deal to end 8-day strike. This is CGTN. Welcome to Africa Live with me, Beatrice Marshall from Nairobi. We'll bring you the details on those stories in just a moment. But first, Uche Okoronko with the day's business headlines. Uche.
Thank you, Beatrice. And here's a look at what's coming up on Africa Live Biz. Kenya's central bank raises its capital levels. And Nigeria bans textile imports to revive its local industries. Of course, all that coming up within the program. For now, back to you, Beatrice.
Uche, thank you. And let's begin with the African Union's demand. It is demanding that the United Kingdom to comply with the United Nations resolution calling for it to withdraw from the Chagos archipelago in the Indian Ocean, which is considered a part of Mauritius. The UK is under increased international pressure to give up its last territory in Africa since the International Court of Justice 1965 ruling saying that the accession of the island from Mauritius had been unlawful. The UN General Assembly affirmed the ruling in May and set a 6-month deadline that expired Friday. Almost all African nations support the resolution. The UK, however, argues it cannot give up the Chagos archipelago for security reasons. It's leased the biggest island to the United States, which runs a military base there that supports operations in the Middle East and Afghanistan. Well, let's get more on that story. And I'm joined by CGTN's Coletta Wanjohi. She's in Addis Ababa. And Mr. Gideon Chitanga, a regional political analyst at PESA, a political economic think tank, is in South Africa for us. Coletta, first off to you, though, the African Union has urged the UK to comply with the United Nations resolution calling for it to withdraw from the Chagos archipelago in the Indian Ocean. What more are you hearing from the African body?
Well, we've got a statement from the African Union chairperson, Musa Faki Mahamat, who has expressed concern and says that the whole African Union is expressing concern on the fact that the United Kingdom has not honored the 22nd November deadline that it was given by the United Nations to allow the area within Mauritius to be given back to Mauritius, which the African Union considers as a sovereign state. The African Union says it will continue pushing the United Kingdom to vacate the area because it has the Constitutive Act within the African Union, which allows for its member states to enjoy sovereignty, to enjoy territorial integrity, and also to be able to manage its own independence and enjoy that. So what the African Union is saying that it hopes that the United Kingdom will start the process of moving out from that area. But at the end of the day, we all know that it's not really as easy as the African Union just raising concern.
Well, Gideon, the UN General Assembly set a 6-month deadline for the UK to withdraw what expired on Friday. Why do you think the UK missed the deadline?
So the UK has already indicated that it is not interested in leaving the archipelago and allowing Mauritius to take it back for its own strategic reasons, and the idea that it says it is this archipelago is a strategic importance, and we know that the UK leased this island to the US and it's being used for military purposes. There is a lot of infrastructure there and human resource from the US and in partnership with the UK. We understand that the UK and the US are using this base for operations that are directed at countering terrorism. But I don't think that these interests have necessarily anything to do with the Mauritius and the people of Mauritius. So I guess that it's ironic that for a country that is asserting its sovereignty by choosing to leave the European Union, it is still seeking to continue to repress and oppress the people of Mauritius by cutting a chunk of their territory. It's really unfortunate.
All right, Coletta, now the Prime Minister of Mauritius, Pravin Kumar Jugnauth, called Britain's refusal to give up control of the island a violation of international law. What more can the African Union, though, do in this situation?
Well, all the African Union can do, I think, at this moment is keep lobbying and keep pushing for the United Kingdom to respect to respect the sovereignty of Mauritius. Now, in February this year, when the heads of state met, they passed some declarations on this same issue of Mauritius, and they instructed that the African Union chairperson should follow up with the legal department of the AU and ensure that it follows the legal procedures as per the pronouncements of the International Court of Justice, and ensure that things are done legally to ensure that Mauritius gets back its land. And secondly, the African Union directed, the heads of state directed the African group in New York, because we have representatives in the United Nations, to keep pushing together with those members of the United Nations that support Mauritius to ensure that Mauritius gets back its sovereignty. So it will be, we're bound to see a lot of lobbying. Africa will be looking for friends of Africa beyond the continent, and people probably who have effect or impact in case they look out to, or they speak out to the United Kingdom. So we're bound to see a lot of lobbying and a lot of legal declarations and legal emphasis being put by the continent.
Right, Gideon, so why is the archipelago important to the United Kingdom, and why have they leased it out, though?
So it's obviously located in a very strategic position geographically, and it's being used to mount military operations in the Middle East. And the UK is using that as the basis to continue to want to retain it. But like I said earlier, I don't think that these reasons really matter to the sovereignty and self-determination of the people of Mauritius. It is also just a violation of the human rights of the populations which were actually shipped out of the archipelago. And I think that as it stands, the UK does not have any justification. Its own interests cannot be sustained over the repression of the interests of the people of Mauritius. There is no state under international law which has precedence or more importance than any other states. And I think that under the circumstances, the current or the successive regimes of the United Kingdom which have had to deal with this situation have really been behaving in a very rogue manner, consistently and persistently violating international law to the point of defying positions and opinions of the international, of the ICJ and the United Nations.
All right, Gideon Chitanga joining us there from Johannesburg, and Coletta Wanjohi in Addis Ababa. To you both, thank you. And now let's stay in Ethiopia for the moment. The ruling coalition has approved the merger of 3 of its 4 ethnic-based parties into a single party ahead of the 2020 elections. The New Prosperity Party is part of Prime Minister Abiy's efforts to unite the country. But one of the parties boycotted the meeting and vote, saying the move was rushed and undemocratic. The Prime Minister has refuted those claims, saying the merge is a crucial step in harnessing energy to work towards a shared vision. Ahmed Abiy hopes his rapid reforms can win over voters alienated by decades of abuse by the ruling coalition before the 2020 elections.
The Council of the ruling EPRD party has decided yesterday to adopt the formation of a new party dubbed Prosperity Party. It was said the new party will guarantee the future of the country.
Based on our existing reality, we see lots of extreme views on our national unity. Also, there are extreme views on ethnicity. The new party will work to find the middle ground on all this. An all-inclusive party is the only solution for the problem in our country.
This new party will be a merger of all parties now in power, unlike the former, which was formed out of 4 sister parties. The program of the New Prosperity Party has ambitions of strengthening success, correcting mistakes, and working for prosperity.
The new Prosperity Party attempts to strengthen the past success of the country in economy, social and foreign relations. The victory registered so far will be expanded further. Secondly, whether at the level of the country or the party, any mistakes and errors shall be corrected by the new party. Lastly, based on existing reality, we will work for prosperity of the present and future generations.
Ethiopia is just a few months away from its general elections, at a time when many citizens are hoping to see a much better secured and developing nation. Analysts say the merger Prosperity Party could be one of the likely choice for many. Grumtara CGTN, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
The 8-day strike at South African Airlines is finally over. In a statement, the embattled national carrier said that the unions involved, that is the National Union of Metal Workers of South Africa and the South African Cabin Crew Association, agreed to an increase of 5.9% on total cost of employment retrospective to 1st April 2019, which will be paid in the February 2020 payroll. The back payment for the first 6 months would be paid in March 2020, with the remaining 4 months paid in April of 2020. A task team will also be established to identify and consider cost-saving initiatives, insourcing and contracts for the airline. The airline last week said it would have to do away with 944 jobs, which prompted the unions to embark on the strike.
The negotiations got off to a rocky start earlier in the week, and following a meeting with the Public Enterprises Minister Pravin Gordhan, the two sides met again, seeking common ground.
What we do know is that we worked through the night in order to come up with a document to present to members, and we worked very hard to make sure that we meet sort of the expectation of the members, and we believe we've done so.
It has been a very difficult time for our members. They've been out there every day, singing, picketing, protesting. There's no way we could have secured this without their commitment, and that's why we had to say that we're so proud of them.
The ailing state-owned airline has been in a tailspin for several years, with government providing regular bailouts to keep the airline in the air. On Thursday evening, SAS said that the scheduled November salaries wouldn't be paid on time because the airline didn't have any money.
This has happened before, I must tell you. It's not the first time we've had this sort of crisis, and hence the resilience. People ask, people have lost all this money. Yes, because we know the situation of SAA. It's not the first time we've been on the brink of not paying salaries or paid them late. So it doesn't really surprise us. I think people are saying, yeah, here we go again, And we are saying we've got a task team now. We've got a clear plan onto how to put money back into SAA. So we have to work on that urgently.
The unions say they've had to get creative to find a solution that didn't involve the state funding the entire increase. A task team has been created to investigate which of the outsourced 100 contracts can be renegotiated, cancelled or brought in-house as a first step.
We've done so much work with South African Airways Technical. Just in the last 3 days when we've been meeting, we've already managed to save them 82 million because of this process. And we have more meetings scheduled with them so that we can do more work.
The SAA strike is officially over. It's Friday afternoon, and it looks like the airline will get back on track by Monday at the latest. This is good news for the airline and for the workers because there's no retrenchments either. I'm Angelo Coppola for CG10 at OR Tambo International Airport in South Africa.
Well, let's cross over now to Burkina Faso, where groups linked to Al-Qaeda are expanding their operations in Africa and exploiting gold mines across the region after losing ground in the Middle East. This is according to security officials in the area. The armed men have restricted residents in the area from mining gold. And if they do mine, locals are in return required to give them a cut. CGTN's Brian Toussaint with the details.
Gold has long been an ideal commodity for insurgents. The mineral is widely accepted as a proxy for currency in many parts of Africa, the Middle East, and even Asia. Gold retains its value, and once it's refined, it can easily be smelted and smuggled. According to a 2017 report filed by Burkina Faso's National Institute for Statistics and Demography, the country produces nearly 9,500 kilograms of gold. But a big part of the mineral is lost to fraud through non-official circuits, which are not controlled by the country.
The security situation in the country has an impact on the state's politics in general. But for a small-scale mining, we cannot send regulation teams in all the areas affected by this insecurity. It's very difficult for us to send our agents to the field in order to organize the mining sites.
Burkina Faso's government, however, says it has tried to contain the militants and has banned residents from mining in areas where the rebels operate. But despite these bans, mining continues in these areas.
I think it's enough for them to maintain their army so that they can reinforce themselves and reinforce their technical and logistical capacity, because the gold market is flourishing and never goes down.
The illegal mining claimed the lives of 20 people after suspected jihadists launched an attack on an informal gold mining site in the northern province of Somme. It is still unclear who exactly controls these mines and how much gold they produce. Brian Toussaint, CGTN.
Zimbabwe and the European Union have taken another step towards normalizing relations after a meeting of ministers in Harare on Thursday. This was a second round of talks between officials from the Southern African country and the European bloc following the launch of the dialogue process in June this year.
There were handshakes, hearty smiles and group photos at the end of a marathon meeting which inched a relationship strained for nearly 2 decades closer towards normalcy. The talks focused on economic cooperation, democratic reforms and sanctions.
We have urged the EU that they can assist us in removing the sanctions or talking to other people who continue to have sanctions with us, and they indicated to us that they have removed most of the sanctions that they had imposed on Zimbabwe, and they have demanded that we share with them the type of effects of the sanctions that we are talking about.
The EU Council is due to review its restrictive measures on Zimbabwe next February, taking into account progress in implementing promised reforms.
We do think from the EU side that progress has been slower than we would have expected, and I think it has been also slower than the government has originally pronounced about how quickly the government would move forward with various reforms. But we had a good, quite detailed discussion about that, and clear indications that further steps on the reform agenda would be taken.
Another meeting is scheduled for June 2020, ahead of which key benchmarks have been set.
These involve such issues such as the follow-up to the recommendations of the Motlanthe Commission report, and also electoral reforms. The interministerial task force is working on them. So we understood, and that we hope that by indeed our next meeting we would have more concrete steps on these issues. We also sent quite clear messages from our side that how we regard the human rights situation, that we would not want to see it further incidents in that account.
The EU says it's encouraged by the establishment of a national political dialogue earlier this year, but has urged all parties to participate in the process. The main opposition MDC has rebuffed invitations to participate in the inter-party talks. Farai Mwakutuya, CGTN, Harare, Zimbabwe.
You're watching Africa Live. Still ahead on the program. Nigeria begins a countrywide immunization exercise for measles and meningitis. And the UN mandates Tanzania to compensate assault victims in albinism case.
Each day, there are millions of stories. Each one can open new perspectives, new possibilities. Wherever you look, we are there to see, discover, explore. We put the pieces together to find what really matters to you, all around the world, all around the clock. Our reporters are at home across the globe. From our headquarters in Beijing and production centers in Washington, Nairobi, and London, China Global Television Network. Stories from across the globe, reaching people across the globe. CGTN. See the difference.
The sea is ferocious and powerful, and only someone that really lives here and understands what we have really comes to love our Southern Ocean and its inhabitants. Jacques Cousteau has a quote which really is fitting to me, which is, "The sea, once it's cast its spell, holds you in its net of wonder forever."
Nigeria has begun a countrywide immunization exercise for measles and meningitis. It is part of plans to include the meningitis A vaccine into the country's routine immunization schedule. Recent cases of the disease has spurred the campaign to vaccinate millions of children in vulnerable zones. CGTN's Kelechi Emekalam with more.
A massive immunization exercise ongoing in Nigeria's capital, Abuja. Healthcare officials go from hospitals to homes and even schools. Their targets, children under 5 who are more susceptible to measles and meningitis. More than 600,000 children are expected to be vaccinated in the federal capital. This is part of efforts to curb the outbreak and surge of the diseases.
Measles is endemic in Nigeria, and it causes outbreak from time to time. So in order to control that, with the view to eliminating it, we are having to sustain the tempo of supplemental activities to boost the immunity of the community. That's from where the routine immunization has reached.
Meningitis is a viral or bacterial infection which causes inflammation of the membranes around the brain and spinal cord. The effect: stiff neck, brain damage, and death in some cases. Both measles and meningitis are still considered high causes of childhood deaths around the world. Out of Nigeria's 36 states, 25 of them and the federal capital fall within the meningitis and measles belt. 26.7% of the country's 200 million population are at risk of these epidemics, children being the most vulnerable.
Usually in dry season, people have outbreak, or communities have outbreak of meningitis in this country, and the campaigns usually come late. That's when the outbreak has already started, like if you are reacting to the outbreak.
It is being triggered by this compartment of people in a single room without adequate ventilation. And when they sit, it spreads easily and it causes loss of consciousness and brain damage in children.
At an average 31%, Nigeria's routine immunization coverage is still considerably low. That's why the campaign is seen as a step in the right direction, especially in the northern states where high temperatures cause the diseases to thrive. The campaign, which kicked off November the 16th, would be completed on the 23rd. Kelechi Emekalam, CGTN Abuja, Nigeria.
Well, let's go to the DR Congo, where a measles outbreak has killed close to 5,000 people since the year began. The highly contagious disease has spread across the country. Congolese health officials are now working with international health experts to try and contain the epidemic. CGTN's Chris Ochamringa has more from Kinshasa.
Authorities in the DRC are battling the country's worst measles outbreak since 2011. The World Health Organization says more than 250,000 people have been infected with the disease since the start of the year, and close to 5,000 of them have died. Most of the deaths have been among children under the age of 5. The country's low immunization rate and weak surveillance system have been blamed for the spread of the disease.
The issue of early response in order to stop the epidemic. It moves like a fire because it is transmitted through it's an airborne disease. So this becomes difficult. We need to respond quickly and go ahead of the epidemic and try to stop it and reduce the trend and stop the epidemic.
The DRC Health Ministry says 4 million children have been vaccinated so far, but millions of others haven't yet been reached. The country's poor road network has affected efforts of delivering vaccines in time. Measles is a highly contagious viral infection that spreads from an infected person by coughing or sneezing. International health agencies have asked donors to contribute funds to contain the measles epidemic. It has already killed twice as many people as Ebola over the past 15 months. Chris Ochamringa, CGTN, Kinshasa, Democratic Republic of Congo.
The UN Committee on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities has mandated the Tanzanian government to compensate a 2008 assault victim who lost her hands in an attack against albinos. Based on the belief that certain body parts of albinistic people can transmit magical powers, albinos in Tanzania live every day as their last day, as they do not know what they may face tomorrow. CGTN's Daniel Kijo tells us more.
In many parts of Africa, people with albinism are victims of prejudice and violence. For Mariam, her next-door neighbor was her worst nightmare. In 2008, he attacked her, held her down, and chopped both her hands off.
He did not just cut it once and be done and take my hand. He kept roughly chopping at my hand, repetitively, just like how you chop wood.
She tried to seek justice from Tanzanian courts but lost her case. The defendants claimed people with albinism could not see clearly, successfully discrediting her own eyewitness account. But she did not give up and took the issue to the UN, where the Committee on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities has now instructed the Tanzanian government to pay her compensation and change the law because of her persistence.
This case is very important because it's the first case to be decided for the person with albinism in our country. And it sends a message that if we are not able to sort at our country level, we are able to send it to the UN.
According to Under the Same Sun, over 520 attacks on people with albinism have been recorded since 2006. Across 28 African countries. 170 incidences have been recorded in Tanzania, one of the largest recorded numbers. Mariam has now become a symbol of hope for many still living in fear.
To the people who did this and others like them, my message to you is all humans are equal. No human limb will make you richer.
There is still a black market for body parts, hair and skin, used by witch doctors in potions and charms. Mariam hopes her government will change policy to protect people living with albinism. The Tanzanian government now has 6 months to act on the issued recommendations. Part of the ruling involves carrying out public awareness campaigns to stop the abuse of people with albinism. It's hoped that this landmark case can lead to a better and safer future for victims. Daniel Kijo, CGTN, Dar es Salaam.
Hong Kong's High Court says police can continue enforcing the city's anti-mask law for the next 7 days. The court says temporary reinstatement of the law will allow Hong Kong's government time to appeal an earlier ruling in which the mask ban was deemed unconstitutional. The court cites the highly exceptional circumstances that Hong Kong is currently facing regarding the decision. The anti-mask law was imposed in October and bans people from wearing masks at both lawful and unlawful assemblies. Well, the Hong Kong Association of the Heads of Secondary Schools says it has been trying to reach students who have been holed up in the Polytechnic University campus since Sunday.
We have been trying to get to as many corners of the campus as possible to contact students,
but we couldn't find them. We only managed to talk with some adult protesters. We have lawyers and social workers ready to provide assistance, and we hope to persuade them to leave the campus.
Well, Hong Kong's Police Commissioner Tang Ping Keung once again called on protesters to leave the campus and vowed to resolve the standoff in a peaceful manner. At least 8 protesters surrendered to the police early Friday. More than 30 are believed to still be inside the university. Meanwhile, Hong Kong's Education Bureau chief has sent a letter to parents and students at government-run secondary schools saying that students must not take part in political activities in schools. IMF Chief Kristalina Georgieva has met with Chinese President Xi Jinping on Friday as part of her first visit to China as the organization's head. During their meeting, President Xi said that due to slower economic growth and rising protectionism, there are higher expectations for the IMF. The Chinese president added that China intends to forge ahead with economic development and further opening up. Georgieva says the IMF supports a free and open trade, expressing willingness to strengthen cooperation with China on the Belt and Road Initiative. The Chinese president also met with former U.S. Secretary of State Henry Kissinger. President Xi Jinping praised Kissinger's historic contribution to China-U.S. relations. He said bilateral relations are now at a critical moment and the two sides should strengthen communication and enhance mutual understanding. He called for the two sides to push China-U.S. relations forward in the right direction, on the basis of mutual respect, win-win cooperation, and the interests of their people. Kissinger said China-U.S. relations are more important in this new era, and the two sides should find a solution to their differences through dialogue. He said it is important to both countries and the world that the two countries continue to cooperate in multiple areas. Well, let's now go to Uche Okoronkwo for the latest in business news. Uche.
Thanks, Beatrice. And coming up on Africa Live Biz. Kenya's central bank raises its capital levels. And Nigeria bans textile imports to revive its local industry. Let's start off in Kenya, where the central bank has increased its paid-up capital, which is basically the amount of money it received from shareholders in exchange for shares of its stock. Now, this will make it more resilient in dealing with shocks in the financial market. CBK's paid-up capital now stands at $345 million. The move to increase CBK's financial muscle follows a recent statement from the National Treasury that it had raised about $650 million out of a targeted $768 million in dividends and retained earnings from state corporations. Now, CBK says increased financial muscle will also enable it to modernize its facilities and its infrastructure. The funds will sustain its ability to issue new generation currency in line with the 2010 Constitution. The regulator needs $148 million to issue the new currency. Meanwhile, despite ample room to cut interest rates, the South African Reserve Bank decided to keep the rates unchanged. The Apex Bank's decision was reached as it wrapped up its last monetary policy committee meeting for 2019. Now, economists were convinced that a rate cut was in the offing after consumer inflation dropped to an 8-year low. The consumer price index for October declined to 3.7% from 4.1% in September. The Reserve Bank usually cuts rates when inflation dips below 4%. But Governor Leseja Kanyago said it's still too risky to ease rates at this stage.
Escalation in global trade tensions, geopolitical risks, further domestic supply constraints, and or sustained higher oil prices could generate headwinds to growth. Public sector financing needs have risen, thus raising the prospect of further pressure on the currency and pushing borrowing costs for the broader economy higher. Implementation of prudent macroeconomic policies and structural reforms that lower costs and increase investment, potential growth and job creation remains urgent. In this persistently uncertain environment, future policy decisions will continue to be highly data dependent, sensitive to the balance of risks to the outlook, and will seek to look through temporary price shocks.
Meanwhile, Kenya's government has provided a big boost for the informal sector, locally known as Jua Kali. That's after placing a $30 million order for doors and windows. Through the State Department for Housing and Urban Development, the government is now procuring about 100,000 doors and 120,000 windows from the informal traders for the affordable housing program. As part of the government's plan to create economic opportunities in the country, the Ministry of Transport, Infrastructure, Housing, Urban Development and Public Works is urging the informal sector to look for opportunities as local content providers for the affordable housing program. Now, the Jua Kali sector is a big contributor to employment in the country and a key enabler of the manufacturing sector. The ministry is now asking the sector to form associations as well as register to provide construction components. Now, when a country closes its borders to imports, does it help or hinder the economy? That's a question Nigerian lawmakers are grappling with now, many of whom believe banning foreign textiles will boost local production. The move is proving controversial, as our correspondent in Abuja, Phil Ihaza, reports.
Maxwell Obinna has been trading in imported textiles for 8 years. He says restricting these materials from coming into the country will create scarcity of the product and may take him out of business.
So if they ban these fabrics, I don't know what they want us to do. And again, banning these fabrics, even the little ones we have, will lead to high rates, whereby customers will not be able to afford the fabrics, which will seriously lead to shutdown of the business. So please, we are pleading with the government. We are pleading with the government to please suspend the action of banning of fabrics, because it will really affect we who are into the business of fabrics.
The Central Bank of Nigeria says the country currently spends above $4 billion annually on imported textiles and ready-made clothing. The size of that bill has many wondering how to stop spending on foreign goods and boost local production instead. Nigerian lawmakers are now proposing a ban on all foreign imports of textile materials for the next 5 years. And some economic experts say the domestic textile industry needs improvement to reach its potential of $10 billion a year.
Ever since the introduction of foreign textiles, Nigerian companies have stopped production. We had 110 Nigerian textile companies. Currently we have 10. 100 have closed with their jobs. So this bill that has been introduced, this is a little bit too late. They should hurry up and pass it to law like yesterday, so that we can begin the production of our own textiles. But the government, through the CBN, can support the manufacturing sector to set up our own textile companies.
But banning textile imports may only be part of the story. Many say the government needs to focus on ways of reviving the local textile industry and monitor subsidies.
There was a time that the 70 billion textile fund was set up. 70 billion. That was 8 years ago when I was in the banking. I don't know what happened to those funds. Let them, various organs of the government to set up their searchlight, that these funds are properly disbursed to manufacturers and they are properly implemented in those factories that will start the production.
Nigeria's textile industry is currently a shadow of its former self, lacking the capacity in manpower or infrastructure to produce enough fabrics for the market. This has led to a dependence on foreign products. If a ban on textile imports is introduced, the gap between the supply and demand could leave the country facing a shortage. Phil Ihaza, CGTN, Abuja.
Now, the first African Netpreneur Awards were held this past week in Accra, Ghana. The initiative was created by Alibaba founder Jack Ma to boost entrepreneurship in Africa. Now, this year, 10 finalists were awarded about $1 million for their innovation and drive to create solutions to some of the continent's biggest challenges. Amongst the finalists were the co-founder and CEO of Uzuri K&Y, which is a Rwandan shoe company that makes handcrafted, eco-friendly shoes. Well, CGTN's Penina Karibe had a chat with her about her products, and she started by asking what inspired her to do the shoes.
First of all, what inspired me to make shoes was that I had passion for it. I went to creative design school, so I wanted to do something that I loved very much. I loved crafting things with my hands. And then I looked at what was missing in the market. I realized people were making probably clothing, jewelry, but not shoes. So mainly because it's hard. So I decided I'm going to start with the hard part. But also, since I was very young, I was really, especially when I joined university, I was really, how can I say, inspired by the idea of creating something for myself and for my community in a way that it could generate jobs for people who could not have access to formal education or who were not really the lucky ones to access university the way I did.
Why do you say your products are eco-friendly, and has this worked as an extra advantage to you?
I don't just say it, we do it. So we make shoes using, first of all, we recycle tires from the streets of Kigali mostly. We want to do it all over Africa. We just go to the streets, people dump these tires on the streets, we collect them, and we work with people around in that very neighborhood to make them sheets, and then we make outsoles out of those tires. And ever since we started, people would just be like, these are just old stuff, they're not gonna work. Our grandpas used to wear these shoes, and they were not really functional. They're not even fashionable. So we add a touch of fashion using woven fabrics, kitenge, which is the African fabric, and we use faux leather or non-animal leather. And that really helps to create a product that is kind of less harmful to the environment compared to the shoes that are out there today. There are plastic shoes, rubber shoes. There are so many other products out there that are really harmful to our environment. We need to start thinking conscientiously about what happens to around us.
Okay, so let's talk about perceptions. And there is a belief that made in Africa products are more expensive than those that come from outside the continent. Do you agree?
They should be expensive. People take so much time actually creating these products. However, if something is expensive, it should be well done. What I would disagree is where something is expensive and it's not really good. So, by the way, my products are pretty much affordable. Average price, $30. Average price. And we're targeting working women. So it's pretty, what I'm saying here is that products that are made with hands, people have to put so much love, patience, and they use their hands, no machine, nothing, just their brain. So you're literally buying their time and their craft. So being expensive, it's okay, but it has to be really, really good and competitive on the global market.
Okay. How are you able to compete against the cheap imports that flood into the African market?
So I will speak for myself. In my company, what we try to do all the time is that we have created jobs for people who work for us mostly. We give them assignments. Like you have to, we're handcrafting products, but they don't have to be 2 pieces. Make thousands of pieces per month so that we can be able to compete on the market with products that are a little bit cheaper, but also bring a component of quality so that we're even better than the products that are imported and cheaply imported.
Well, that's all for now on Africa Live Biz, but ahead on Global Business Africa, unions representing South African Airways staff call off the 8-day strike. We'll have the details of that deal. Coming up top of the hour. For now, back to you, Beatrice.
Uche, thank you. And we still have more news for you here on the program. Here's what's ahead. We'll look at how children in Nigeria raise school fees by singing at a popular beach.
Images may appear to be identical, but looks can be deceiving. The difference is not always obvious. It has to be discovered. There are always different sides to a story. We put the focus on the details. To see more, to understand better. CGTN. See the difference.
Three young budding musicians are thrilling fun seekers at a popular beach in Lagos. Locally known as the Glorious Kids, the three indigenous children who are between the ages of 9 and 14 started their musical band not only to entertain visitors at the beach, but to also raise funds for their education and support their families. And guess what? They're dreaming big. Deji Badmus has that story.
You just can't miss the trio and their pensioner granddad at the popular Takwa Bay Beach along the coast of Lagos. They're always here every weekend entertaining fun seekers. And when they are not out performing or in school, they are rehearsing. Their granddad is their music instructor and life coach, teaching them everything from music to handcraft.
When I bring them out, people will see them, who will help can help. When they entertain people, you know, some people voluntarily we give them something. But meanwhile, our going out mainly is for people to know them. So maybe we can see people who can help.
Most of the children in the community engage in begging, but Sarah, Bisola and Sharif chose to be different, using their skills to entertain and make money in the process. Money that supports their family and sends them to school.
What we have achieved in this music is that it makes us exposed to people, and we met many stars like Davido, Tiwa Savage, Lamide, Adekunle Gold, and they came to this place, and Popcorn in Jamaica. One musician in Jamaica, Popcorn, that make us to be exposed to the whole world. Redemption song. Redemption song.
And they're not doing this just for the money they make here and now. They have bigger dreams as well.
Since we have the talent of singing, we wish to become a musician.
I would like to continue what that is teaching me. I want to be a big person in life, a musician.
Since I've learned how to play bass and all that, I want to be a bassist. Because every little thing is gonna be alright.
Their courage and decision to be different from other local kids on the beach is not only earning them money, it is earning them respect as well.
For someone that does music and someone that loves music, there's a difference between hard work and talent. You know, everybody has a voice to sing, but not everybody can actually work on that voice to sing. So now seeing people or children from the age group of like 9 to 14 playing the guitar and singing well, it's very, very inspiring. Anytime I listen to them, I get goosebumps.
They are very, very talented, and I wish the world can see them come to understand that these are the kind of people that deserve to be nurtured and trained.
Go with me. Go.
Besides music, they also make beads and hats during their spare time, like the one their granddad is putting on. It's all in their bid to survive.
They are working on the album. Now, we have recorded 6 tracks. They are doing 14 tracks for the first album. So the remaining 7 is still there.
Not a few Nigerian music artists really know how to play the guitar, but these kids are fast becoming masters of the instrument. They also compose their own songs, so it just might be a matter of time before the Glorious Kids make it out of this beach and onto the big stage. Deji Badmos, CGTN, Takwa Bay, Lagos.
And your sports news coming up next. Here's what's ahead. South Africa's Caitlin Roskrantz inspiring many young gymnasts by qualifying for the Tokyo 2020 Olympics.
How would you create your legend? On the fields, on the tracks, in the arenas of Africa. Were you born to be a player? Could this moment be yours? Sports Scene. Find your game.
We set off your sport in South Africa, where Caitlin Roskrantz will become the country's first female Olympic gymnast in a decade when she takes to the floor at Tokyo 2020. The 17-year-old has inspired many young gymnasts through her achievements on the global stage to take up the sport with the aim of becoming Olympians. CGTN's Du Plessis has more.
Hard work pays off, and Caitlin Roskrantz knows that because of her commitment and dedication, she is heading to the Olympic Games next year. But what she did not expect is the attention she would get for becoming the Rainbow Nation's first gymnast to qualify for the global event in 10 years.
It's been a really big change for me, I must say. You know, I came back from the World Championships and I was flooded with all the interviews and the media attention, and in between still had to try and write my matric final. So it was really hectic, but it's the tension is exciting, I think, you know, knowing that I'm getting the sport out there.
The African champion has finished her final high school exams and is not going to take a break like her friends on matric vacation, and will instead be focusing on getting better and producing more polished routines.
So I definitely want to work on a lot of my execution, so perfecting my skills even more than I have, adding a few difficulty moves here and there, but we're not going to change a lot of my routines. If anything, it's very minor changes, but we know and we are confident in my routines now, so we're going to try and keep them as they are, you know, as best as we can, and just like I said, really tidy it up and get it as perfect as we can.
Roskrantz isn't putting any additional pressure on herself ahead of the Olympic Games, but says she is aware of the responsibility she has as a role model to so many young gymnasts, not only at her gym, but also across the continent.
I've been through, like I said, a lot of setbacks and surgery, but I had a goal and I did not take my eye off that goal until I got there, and that's, I think, my advice to them is to keep pushing no matter how hard it seems or how impossible it may seem. You know, you will get there eventually.
Caitlin Roskrantz will head to the Olympic Games in Tokyo with the hopes of a nation on her shoulders. The talented teenager knows she will need to produce a near-flawless performance to get close to the podium. And regardless of where the African champion finishes in or out of the medals, she'll continue to be an inspiration to many young girls in the sport of gymnastics. Du Plessis, CGTN, Johannesburg.
The Kenya teams have arrived back in the country after the women emerged winners and their male counterparts finished second at the 2019 Rollerball World Cup in Dubai. The squad is now relishing the achievement of a lifetime. CGTN's Terry Wangare brings us this report.
Song and dance filled the air long before the arrival of the Kenya Rollerball team from the World Cup outing in Dubai. And upon touchdown, the atmosphere became more charged as the squad, family members and gathered supporters belted their voices away. The women's team emerged the overall winners at the 5th edition of the Rollerball World Cup, an achievement the players say was no mean feat.
As you can see, I'm so excited. Yeah, I'm so excited that we took the cup. It has been a very difficult journey. I won't say it was easy. From lacking transport to go for training, lacking facilities. But all I can say is we were so determined.
Their male counterparts arrived home with the silver lining of finishing second, beaten only by defending champions India in the race for the top honours. They now say they've learned from their mistakes as they eye the title at the next edition.
I think what was a challenge to us was the team that beat us, that is India, was quite fast for us. So I think we'll work on our skating more. I think now we've seen that we need more time. We need to start preparing because it's a two-year event. So we need to start preparing for the next one immediately we resume.
After conquering the world, one would wonder what's next for the Kenyan team.
Going forward, we want to expand the game because at the moment we don't have teams at primary and secondary school. We have juniors, but they are not in an organized, they're in clubs. So we want to reach out to the schools, get to the primary schools, secondary schools. Universities are already playing the game. We even have leagues that are running for the game of roll ball, and that's why we are able to perform this well.
As celebrations continue into the night, the sterling performance of Kenya is not only a wake-up call to the local sports officials, but also a message to other African nations that there is enough talent to take on and beat the world in the mother continent. Terry Wangari, CGTN.
The English Premier League returns on Saturday after a 2-week international break.